in the heart of Oschatz, a small German town. The morning air carried a weighty silence, heavy with whispers and the muted stirrings of those who had gathered. At the center of the cobblestone square stood a woman, her hands bound by worn ropes, her face pale, her eyes cast downward, avoiding the judgment of the crowd. A wooden stock pressed into her wrists, while an iron cuff encircled her neck, a stark reminder of a freedom lost. Above her, a crudely painted sign read, "Dishonored." She was Dora von Nissen, a woman whose life had been shaped by forces far beyond her control, whose spirit had endured storms that might have broken a lesser heart. The crowd around her murmured, but not all voices were spoken aloud. Some were conveyed in a stiff glance, a whispered chuckle, or a child pointing with naive curiosity. Every gaze, deliberate or fleeting, seemed to weigh upon her, yet she stood, unbroken, though her body bent under the restraint of the stocks. Before the world had marked her with the word dishonored, Dora had been a child of quiet observation, born in the spring of 1900, in a small, secluded village, far from the grandeur of city life, yet never distant from the rigid expectations of those around her. Her parents, strict yet well-meaning, held dreams for her, visions of normalcy and success that her mind, delicate and different, could not fulfill. Even from the earliest days, it became clear that she would not walk a conventional path. Letters danced confusingly on the page, numbers twisted into shapes that refused to settle. Tasks that seemed effortless to other children became insurmountable mountains to her. Each failure a shadow stretching across her young mind. In school she was labeled slow and whispered about behind closed doors. Teachers scolded her quietly. Parents muttered as they passed in corridors. And classmates, some cruel, some indifferent, laughed at her mistakes. "Dora, pay attention." The words pierced her ears, sharp stones thrown across a silent classroom. She often sat alone, hands twisting a threadbare scarf, eyes wandering toward the trees or the distant horizon. Dyslexia, the adults said, a harmless term, clinical, cold, devoid of empathy. Yet for Dora, it was a prison, each word a barricade, each sentence a wall. Writing was torment, reading a battlefield. And in the silence, she cultivated a keen sense of observation, noticing the smallest tremor in her mother's hands, the fleeting shadows that danced along cobblestones, the way sunlight fractured through glass windows. Germany in those years was a land of contradictions, where tradition clashed with progress, pride collided with shame, and obsession with purity and strength weighed heavily upon the citizens. Those who deviated, whether in body, mind, or spirit, were quietly marked. Dora, gentle, thoughtful, struggling to grasp the language of numbers and letters, was already marked, in ways invisible yet indelible. Her parents tried to shield her. Her mother reading stories aloud, her voice soft, melodic, painting worlds far beyond the village's limits. Her father, stern but loving, guided her in subtle ways, how to read the expressions on a passerby's face, how to navigate the silent rules of society, how to survive small cruelties without surrendering her dignity. By the age of 10, Dora had acquired a dangerous skill, the art of silence. She spoke little, observed everything, and read faces like open books, noting envy, anger, kindness, or fear, capturing each subtle nuance in her memory, storing it as armor against a world that demanded conformity. Even in the small comforts of childhood, moments of joy were tempered with isolation. Stray cat curling around her ankles on rainy afternoons, the laughter of children she could not join, the rustling of birch leaves behind her house, all became her companions. Each fragment of life was treasured. each sound and shadow a lesson, a piece of a world that she could navigate with a quiet resilience. Though the shadow of the future loomed unseen, she began to cultivate her strength, rooted in patience, observation, and endurance. By the early 1930s, when Dora had grown into a young woman, the world around her shifted toward darkness. Germany enacted laws that tore futures from the innocent, judging worth not by heart, but by genetics. The law for the prevention of hereditarily diseased offspring, passed in 1933, promised a nation of strength, yet delivered fear, shame, and silence. Dora, marked as different, was not spared. Hospitals, doctors, and bureaucrats all conspired quietly, taking her autonomy, stealing dreams of marriage, children, and a normal life before they could bloom. Even in the face of such injustice, her spirit endured, like the ancient trees of her village. Weathered by countless storms and wars, she bent but did not break. Whispers followed her, strangers judged without knowing. Yet Dora understood that survival was more than living. It was a quiet defiance. In small gestures, unseen by others, a refusal to yield, a secret kindness, a flitting smile, she preserved the essence of herself, the core of her humanity, a quiet rebellion against forces determined to diminish her. As Dora entered adulthood, the world's pressures grew heavier, yet her quiet resilience strengthened. Trust became a rare commodity, courage measured in small increments, and the heart fragile, tender, yet unyielding became both a sanctuary and a weapon. Every glance, every whispered comment, every judgment she encountered was absorbed, studied, and transformed into an understanding of human behavior, a map of survival in a society bent on obedience and fear. From the awkward, quiet child in the back of the classroom, Dora evolved not in visible strength nor wealth, nor influence, but in a resilience forged through observation, isolation, and an unyielding will to endure. Little did she know that the true tests awaited her, challenges that would demand more than any child or adult should ever be asked to give. The world, now gripped by turmoil and ideology, would soon confront her spirit with cruelty unmatched. Her youth ended as war swept across Germany. Her husband was drafted, leaving Dora alone in a household that seemed colder, emptier, haunted by absence. The fields, the estates, the town, all reflected a society collapsing under fear and obedience. She carried burdens physically and emotionally, tending animals, managing chores, and navigating a world where every glance might signal suspicion. Survival required constant awareness, every moment a test of endurance. Prisoners of war, housed nearby, were subjected to brutality that stripped them of humanity. Starvation, beatings, humiliation, all endured silently, compliance demanded by violence. Dora witnessed these horrors, helpless yet deeply affected, her empathy sharpening in the shadows of cruelty. Small flickers of human kindness emerged occasionally, glimpses of resilience, hope, and the persistence of the human spirit. Visible even amid suffering, whispering lessons of survival. One prisoner, quiet, careful, eyes reflecting sorrow and determination, stood apart. He neither lashed out nor complained, enduring silently. In his steadfastness, Dora recognized a reflection of herself, the quiet defiance of survival. Over time, they spoke in hushed tones, their words fragile, exchanged only when guards were absent. Each conversation, each glance, carried risk, yet also a tether of hope, a secret light connecting them amid pervasive darkness. Rumors spread swiftly in small towns. Neighbors whispered, authorities received reports, and one day Dora's secret was no longer safe. She was intercepted, accused, dragged before the town, and placed in the stocks. Iron cuffs secured her neck, wooden restraints held her wrists, and a sign branded her guilt, dishonored. The crowd gathered, silent but tense with judgment. Every eye, every gesture, seemed a test of her endurance, a measure of her resolve. Chimes stretched in the square, each second deliberate, weighted with scrutiny. Children pointed, merchants paused, whispers fluttered like wind. Dora remained still, pale-faced, wrists pressed into wood. She did not scream, she did not cry, yet inside, she resisted the humiliation, preserving the integrity of her spirit. Her defiance was quiet, invisible to the crowd, but profound, a refusal to surrender entirely to the forces of public shame. After the punishment, life offered no reprieve. Divorce followed, and Dora was sent into exile, a small, quiet town where anonymity was both protection and prison. Factory work provided rhythm and structure, yet each step reminded her of scars etched deeply by cruelty and law, invisible yet vivid in memory. In these silent years, her acts of resistance became subtle, feeding stray cats, offering kindness to strangers, quiet gestures that defied a society intent on diminishing her. The war ended, Germany lay in ruins, yet Dora survived. She witnessed tyranny collapse, oppression lifted, and the painstaking rebuilding of society. Survival was more than mere existence. It was preserving humanity, sustaining dignity, and acting with kindness even when cruelty presented the easier path. In quiet routines, fleeting moments of connection, she maintained her moral compass, each act of compassion a small victory against a harsh world. Dora never sought recognition. She did not tell her story aloud, did not demand acknowledgement. Her quiet acts, helping neighbors, feeding the hungry, small kindnesses, became her rebellion. Through these gestures, she reclaimed dignity the world had attempted to strip away. Her endurance was subtle, yet profound, proving that resilience could thrive in the shadows, that courage could exist without applause, and that humanity could survive even in the darkest circumstances. Her life became a testament to observation and patience. The memories of public humiliation, whispered judgments, and laws designed to destroy dreams lingered, yet they did not define her. They were lessons, reminders of the power of silence, the strength of endurance, and the importance of small acts of kindness. Even as the world changed, cities lay in ruins, nations in turmoil, she found anchors in daily routines, the companionship of animals, fleeting laughter, and quiet music. Even as Germany began to rebuild, Dora remained cautious. Trust was measured, friendships sparse, emotions guarded. Yet within this careful existence, she nurtured a sense of purpose. Survival alone was not enough. To endure with integrity, to act with humanity, to preserve a small light of hope in a fractured world became her mission. Her quiet rebellion, her invisible legacy. Each day required vigilance, each interaction demanded discernment, and each choice shaped the contours of her remaining life. In her later years, Dora witnessed generations rise and fall, families scattered, cities reconstructed, and nations reshaped. She observed the slow march of history with quiet attention, her eyes reflecting the weight of experience, the depth of endurance. Though largely unnoticed by the world, she became a symbol, not of fame, but of resilience, a living testament to the human spirit's capacity to withstand cruelty and maintain dignity, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Her legacy was subtle, hidden in the folds of everyday life, yet profoundly impactful. Dora von Nissen had endured oppression from a regime valuing conformity over compassion, had survived public humiliation, personal loss, and the theft of autonomy. Yet she persisted, embodying courage that was quiet, enduring, invisible, yet unyielding. She showed that strength was not always measured by physical might, nor influenced by wealth or status, but by the ability to preserve humanity under relentless pressure. History often remembers battles, leaders, victories, and defeats. Yet the quiet lives of those who endured reveal deeper truths. Dora's story reminds us that resilience is sometimes silent, that strength often whispers, and that survival is more than mere existence, is the act of maintaining humanity when everything around you seeks to destroy it. Her life, largely forgotten in broader historical narratives, holds profound lessons for those who listen carefully, who observe patiently, who value subtle endurance. Returning in thought to Auschwitz, one can imagine Dora standing in the stocks, marked as dishonored yet unbroken. Her gaze remains steady, her spirit intact, a silent testament to endurance, courage, and humanity. The lessons of her life are carried not just in history books, but in the minds and hearts of those who reflect on her perseverance. Each act of quiet defiance, each subtle gesture of kindness, each moment survived under oppression forms the mosaic of a life profoundly lived, a legacy invisibly etched into the world. Dora's story further reflects on memory, history, and the unnoticed threads of human experience. Many lives like hers are overshadowed by grand narratives of war, politics, and social upheaval. Yet within quiet endurance lies profound insight that even forgotten stories possess weight, that the resilience of a single life can illuminate truths often overlooked. Dora's endurance teaches that courage does not always roar, that defiance can be invisible, and that dignity can survive even when society conspires to erase it. She experienced the rise and fall of regimes, the shifting borders of nations, the devastation of war, and the painstaking reconstruction of communities. Throughout it all, she maintained a moral compass. Small acts of kindness guided her, patience shielded her, and humanity remained her constant companion. Each day was lived deliberately, each encounter approached thoughtfully. Her life exemplified the quiet victories of integrity, the subtle power of resilience, and the enduring strength of human compassion. Even in the aftermath of destruction, Dora observed the rebuilding of communities, the resilience of neighbors, and the attentive hope emerging from ruins. She recognized the fragility and strength of human connections, the importance of empathy in times of fear, and the significance of maintaining moral courage. Through her actions, feeding the hungry, caring for the sick, assisting those overlooked, she demonstrated that enduring kindness and quiet defiance can ripple through generations, shaping a more humane world. In her solitude, Dora found reflection and understanding. She understood human nature, the impulses that drive cruelty, and the resilience that allows survival. She recognized patterns of behavior, the ways fear manipulates, and the moments when courage blossoms quietly. Her observations became wisdom, her endurance a beacon for anyone who might face oppression. Through her subtle actions, She reclaimed autonomy, asserting the quiet power of persistence, integrity, and moral clarity in a world that often rewarded obedience over humanity.
Through the decades, Dora observed quietly, understanding that the human spirit could bend but need not break. She witnessed neighbors rebuild homes from rubble, children learning again in schools with shattered windows, families gathering in modest kitchens. And yet amidst this fragile renewal, the echoes of past cruelty lingered. Her memories of humiliation, loss, and fear were never far, yet they sharpened her compassion, deepened her understanding, and strengthened her resolve to act with integrity. She noticed the subtle triumphs of daily life, the baker offering bread to the elderly without expectation, the teacher patiently guiding a struggling child, the mechanic repairing a bicycle for free, the nurse staying past her shift to comfort the sick. In these small ordinary acts, Dora saw the persistence of humanity, the quiet resistance to despair. Each gesture reminded her that kindness, even in tiny doses, was a form of rebellion against a world that had once sought to crush hope. Dora's own actions became deliberate, measured, and meaningful. She cultivated routines that allowed her to observe and assist. Every day she walked slowly through the town, noting faces, gestures, moods, and silent struggles. She offered help where needed, but discreetly, ensuring the recipients maintained dignity. She learned to be invisible yet present, a guiding hand unseen, a voice unheard, and a force for good unnoticed. In this she found both solace and purpose, a way to survive while preserving her humanity. Her memories of early suffering remained vivid, yet she never dwelled on bitterness. Instead, she transformed those experiences into empathy. She understood the fear in a young mother's eyes, the hesitation of a laborer wary of authority, the cautious trust of a child who had known cruelty. Through observing and listening, Dora developed a rare sensitivity to human suffering, a capacity to comfort without judgment, and a way to nurture hope quietly, fostering resilience in others as she had fostered it in herself. Time pressed on, and Dora aged gracefully, her movements deliberate, her gaze clear and unhurried. She carried the weight of history lightly, though the depth of her experience was immense. Her body bore the marks of labor and endurance, yet her mind remained sharp and her heart undiminished. She became a living archive of lessons learned through observation, trial, and perseverance, a quiet historian of human resilience, recording the nuances of behavior, morality, and courage in her own life and in the lives she touched. She understood that legacy is not always public, nor celebrated. It often resides in the subtle, almost imperceptible impacts one leaves on the world. A word of encouragement, a shared smile, a small act of assistance, these were the vessels in which Dora stored her moral victories. She knew that these moments, though fleeting, could cascade, influencing others to act with integrity, compassion, and courage. In this understanding, Dora found purpose and a sense of continuity with the generations that would follow. Dora's attention to detail became legendary among those who observed her. She noted not only the visible actions of people, but also the small telling signs of character. A quick glance, a brief hesitation, a trembling hand, or an unguarded smile, all became lessons, both in understanding others and in guiding her own actions. This attention shaped her interventions, enabling her to act where needed, to comfort where possible, and to stand by silently when no action was required, reinforcing the principle that endurance can be as subtle as it is powerful. Even in moments of solitude, Dora reflected on the intersection of history and morality. She pondered the choices of those who had perpetrated cruelty and the circumstances that had allowed such cruelty to flourish. She compared these with acts of courage, small and large, that had persisted despite fear and oppression. In these reflections, Dora refined her understanding of humanity, discerning the patterns of obedience and rebellion, the cycles of oppression and resistance, and the enduring potential for moral choice even in dire circumstances. She remembered the children of her youth, the classmates who had mocked, the teachers who had whispered, the neighbors who had judged. Yet she forgave, not out of weakness, but from recognition that human behavior is often shaped by fear, ignorance, and conformity. By forgiving, she liberated herself from bitterness, allowing her focus to remain on acts of kindness, the quiet support of others, and the preservation of dignity in her own life and the lives of those around her. In this practice, she discovered a profound inner freedom. Dora's life, though lived largely in obscurity, exemplified the principles she had learned through suffering: patience, empathy, resilience, and discreet courage. She taught, through her existence, that one does not need recognition to act with integrity, that small actions can ripple through communities, and that survival is inseparable from maintaining humanity. Her legacy became embedded in the lives she touched, the kindness she demonstrated, and the quiet defiance she embodied against cruelty and indifference. As Dora aged further, she found herself drawn to the rhythms of nature. She walked the fields at dawn, observing the first light filtering through the mist, listening to the songs of birds and noting the subtle changes in the seasons. In these quiet moments, she felt a connection to life that transcended human cruelty, a reminder that the world, though marred by suffering, also carried beauty, resilience, and continuity. Nature became both sanctuary and teacher, reinforcing lessons of patience, endurance, and renewal. She tended to a small garden behind her modest home, nurturing flowers, vegetables, and herbs with care and attention. Each seed planted, each sprout nurtured, became a metaphor for human endurance. Watching plants grow, weather storms, and reach fruition reminded Dora of her own resilience and the potential within others. She found satisfaction in these simple acts, understanding that tending life, whether plant or person, required patience, respect, and consistency over time. Dora also devoted herself to observing social change. She noted the cautious rebuilding of towns, the cautious optimism of children born after the war, and the gradual, uneven restoration of civil society. She recorded in her mind the patterns of human behavior, how communities healed, how fear lingered, and how courage and kindness persisted quietly despite obstacles. Each observation was catalogued in the mental archive she had constructed over decades, forming a living history of human endurance. In her interactions, Dora remained deliberate. She listened more than she spoke, allowing others to reveal their struggles, hopes, and fears. She offered guidance only when solicited, always with discretion, ensuring that those who received it retained dignity and agency. Her presence became a quiet reassurance to neighbors, a stabilizing force in moments of tension, and a subtle lesson in moral courage. She became known quietly as someone whose wisdom came from experience, observation, and unwavering patience. Dora also devoted time to mentoring the young in subtle ways. She offered practical advice, guidance on navigating societal expectations, and lessons on human. Her quiet demeanor began to seek her out, sensing a depth of understanding and safety. Through this, she extended her influence, teaching the values of resilience, empathy, and integrity without imposing, commanding. She reflected often on the passage of time, the shifting of eras, and the rise and fall of power. She recognized that many lives had been overshadowed, distorted, or erased by history, yet she also understood that the memory of these lives, preserved quietly in the hearts of survivors, was potent. Recognition but to endurance, moral courage, and the capacity to maintain humanity. Even when she faced her own frailties, aches of age, fatigue, and the occasional loneliness, Dora maintained a disciplined routine. She rose early, walked, purposefully tended her home and garden, and engaged with neighbors. Each day became a testament to continuity, the conscious assertion of life and morality against the inevitability of decay and forgetfulness. She understood that longevity offered both responsibility and opportunity, a chance to witness the unfolding of history, while remaining a moral compass within her small sphere of trust and the delicate repair of relationships frayed by fear, oppression, and loss. She noticed through her observations, Dora gained insight into societal recovery, the slow reconstruction, changes in demeanor, in manners, in cautious laughter that returned to public spaces. She catalogued these with care, noting patterns of resilience, the recurring human tendency to rebuild, and the quiet acts of courage that often went unnoticed by official histories. This was her contribution, understanding, documenting, and embodying the moral lessons of survival. Dora also reflected on the nature of memory. She understood that forgetting was often a societal mechanism to move forward. Yet remembering accurately and thoughtfully, survival became both a personal archive and a moral compass. By reflecting carefully on these experiences, she could guide others, provide subtle mentorship, and ensure that the past informed but did not dominate the present. In all aspects of her life, Dora maintained a careful balance between observation and action, silence and engagement. She cultivated a presence that was both steady and nurturing, aware of the weight of history and the fragility of human morality. She became a living example of resilience, demonstrating that endurance is not merely survival but the conscious, deliberate preservation of integrity. Compassion could have profound, lasting impact.
As Dora aged, she increasingly valued the quiet moments, the sound of rain on rooftops, the distant murmur of a town waking, the gentle rustle of trees in the wind. These moments became meditative opportunities to reflect on her past, the lessons she had learned, and the strength she had cultivated over decades. She understood that peace was not the absence of hardship, but the ability to remain centered, compassionate, and morally resolute despite it.
She continued to observe human behavior with the keen insight of one who had endured both cruelty and kindness. Even in small interactions, an argument resolved, a neighbor offering help, a child showing empathy, she saw the persistence of virtue. These observations reinforced her understanding that morality and courage could survive in subtle forms, that the smallest acts often carried the greatest weight, and that endurance was a cumulative practice rather than a singular achievement. Dora's home became a sanctuary for those in need, not through grand gestures but through consistent, deliberate care. She offered a warm meal to a struggling neighbor, tended minor injuries with attention and patience, and listened without judgment to confessions of sorrow and fear. Her presence became a quiet, stabilizing force, demonstrating that resilience and humanity could thrive even when the world outside remained chaotic, harsh, or indifferent. She also became a chronicler of lived experience, carefully recounting memories to herself, noting patterns of human behavior, and reflecting on the consequences of social and political systems. These internal records were never intended for publication. They were exercises in understanding, synthesis, and moral clarity. In doing so, Dora preserved the intangible wisdom of her generation, the subtle lessons of endurance, and the profound importance of maintaining integrity under pressure. Her relationship with nature deepened further. Each season brought new insights. The rebirth of spring mirrored resilience. The heat of summer symbolized struggle and growth. The falling leaves of autumn reflected impermanence, and the stillness of winter reminded her of reflection and preparation. Through these cycles, Dora drew parallels to human life, the inevitability of change, the necessity of adaptation, and the possibility of renewal after hardship. Dora also observed the younger generations with careful attention. She noted how they navigated the legacies of war, oppression, and social upheaval. Some struggled with inherited fears, others with a sense of entitlement, and a few demonstrated remarkable insight and courage. Through subtle mentorship, guidance, and example, she encouraged empathy, patience, and the cultivation of resilience, imparting lessons learned the hard way through her own life. Despite advancing age, Dora maintained a disciplined schedule, embracing physical activity, reflection, and social connection. Her days were structured with intentionality, allowing her to maintain vitality and clarity of thought. She continued walking, gardening, and caring for animals, finding that these practices reinforced both physical endurance and emotional stability. Her life became a living testament to the integration of daily practice, moral fortitude, and reflective observation. She reflected often on her journey, from a misunderstood child to a resilient adult, from public humiliation to quiet authority of wisdom. Dora understood that survival was more than physical endurance. It encompassed ethical integrity, empathy for others, and the capacity to sustain hope in the face of adversity. Her narrative, though largely private, represented a model for how to navigate life's trials without surrendering humanity or dignity. In her final years, Dora became a living archive of memory, a vessel through which the past spoke. She recounted stories to those willing to listen, each tale imbued with lessons of caution, courage, and compassion. Through these narratives, she provided insight into human nature, the consequences of social injustice, and the ways in which resilience could be cultivated. She became both mentor and witness, demonstrating the enduring value of observation, reflection, and moral courage. When she passed at the age of 103, Dora left behind no grand monument, no public recognition, no accolades. Yet her life had been monumental in its quiet impact, in the lives she touched, the lessons she imparted, and the example she set. Her story, largely hidden from history, illustrated the profound strength of endurance, the subtle power of human kindness, and the capacity for courage to persist even under relentless oppression. Through Dora's experiences, we grasp the profound importance of remembering, observing, and nurturing the human spirit. Her life serves as a lens through which we examine our own capacity for empathy, patience, and resilience. The echoes of her endurance remind us that dignity can survive humiliation, that courage can exist in silence, and that hope can flourish even in the shadows of cruelty.